Hey guys, welcome back to the demo of the apple. We've left off with the backlight. So start with a new layer, and I'm going to name this one stem. And then I'm going to set up my brush tool by clicking on the brush tool and then going to my brush options up here on top. I'm going to set up my form. Now the first thing I'm going to pay attention to is my brush tip size and shape. So we're going to focus here on the size, and we're going to set my brush size to 14. I'm going to have 100% hardness. I don't want a blurry stock. And my spacing set to 1%. Next we're going to move down to our shape and dynamics. And where it says controls, have you go down to fade. And we're going to change our fade to 70. We're going to set our minimum diameter to 20. And then we're going to leave all our other aspects to 0%. Once I have those set up, I'm going to set my foreground color to the color I want my stock to be. So I'm going to double click that. And you just want to kind of pick out a good brown color. If you want to focus on a specific color, you can type in my exact number here, which is 502001, or you can just pick a random color. Once we have that set up, we can go ahead and use our pen tool. And once you have your pen tool selected, go up to our form here where it says shape and make sure you're set to path as your option. And then with that selected, go to the upper right hand corner of your apple here, outside of the form, and then going down to the center and click and pull. Once you have the form selected, we want to go to our path panel. I'm going to hide my brush here. With our path panel here, now you have a couple options here. These are little shortcuts where you can choose to select, fill, stroke, things like that. But what we want to do is make sure you're on the correct layer. So what it's doing is you're taking this path and applying to what you want on the actual layer that you have selected. So I selected my stem layer. I'm in my working path, which I could also name stem by clicking on it, so they match. Then I can stroke my path. Now it strokes with the last form of what you set it up with. So you could click this as a shortcut. If you have something different set up, you can go to the upper right hand corner, go down to the stroke path option, and you can choose the tool that you want to stroke with. I want to stroke with my brush, and then I'm going to choose OK. And it's going to set it up. Now a few things you also want to pay attention to is the percentage that you have dedicated to this. So right now it's not 100%, so I want to make sure that's fixed. So going to my brush, the last time I had my brush, my opacity was set at 46%, so I'm going to make sure it's back up to my 100%. And then since I already stroked this, I can just click this button here and it'll restroke my form. And that's what I mean by shortcut. Alright, so now we have a basic stem here, and what I want to do next is I want to create a little texture on my stem, and I want to create a highlight. Now since I have this all set up, I'm going to do the highlight first. So I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to name this stem highlight. Once I have my highlight situated, I'm going to switch my highlight color to white. So I'm going to just choose a basic white. And I'm going to go back to my brush tool, and this time I'm going to reduce the size of my brush tool and make it a little bit smaller, because I want to have it about a little less than half of this size, but I'm going to probably go to about 5. And then on my stem highlight layer, I can go ahead and click this button again, and now it created a little highlight. The next thing I'm going to do is we want to blur the highlight so it's not so predominant. Selecting the stem, I'm going to click off on my path, so right here, and deactivate it so I don't see my point. And I'm going to zoom in by holding down Command or Control +, so I can kind of see the points up close. And holding down Command, I'm going to activate my dancing ants around my stem. On my stem highlight layer, I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. I'm going to soften that highlight up a bit. And I'm only going to take this to probably 1 or 2. Yeah, 1.8 looks great. So I'm going to take it there. So I feel like just a little bit of a highlight, and I can actually reduce my opacity here too, so it's not so predominant. You're not getting that bright light. Now, one of the things, deselecting by hitting Command D, one of the things is with the stem, if you really pay attention to it, it has a texture involved. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock my transparency lock, and I'm going to add some detail, some texture. So I'm going to go to Filter, I'm going to go to Noise, I'm going to choose Add Noise. Now the most important part of adding noise is remembering for this to be monochromatic. So you want to make sure this box right here is checked. Very important. Now the uniform or the Gaussian, not as important. I'm going to stick with uniform because I like the texture that's happening with that. Another option I want you to pay attention to is the percentage. How much texture do you want to apply? I don't think we need all that much. Anywhere between 3 and 12 is fine. I'm going to take a look about half this and check out 6. Oh, that's much nicer. So 6 seems to be the right amount for me. So I'm going to choose OK. And you see the detail of the texture of the stem. Now, I definitely don't want any parts of it happening down below. So I'm going to remove that part. So I'm going to go to my dent layer here and activate my marquee by holding down Command and selecting. Then I'm going to go to my marquee tool here, and I'm going to choose a rectangle marquee. And as one of my options up above here is I can choose to add to a selection I currently have. So selecting this option here, I'm going to draw a rectangle, and now you have this top portion as well as this bottom portion. Now what I want to do is just remove this. So you can do this one of two ways. Right now I have the inside of this activated, so I'm going to select inverse. So now I have the out form selected. I could simply hit delete on my keyboard. I can use the eraser tool. Anything would work that removes the object. You can even mask. But for me, I want it permanently gone, so I'm just going to hit delete on the stem layer. And on the highlight layer, the same thing, delete one more time because you're getting a little bit of white right there from the highlight. And now both of them are gone. I'm going to deactivate this by deselecting, by hitting Control or Command D. And now I have my stem. Now on my stem layer, you notice as it goes down, you want it to be a little darker in here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my burn tool, and on my stem layer with a nice smaller brush than that, that's ridiculous, I'm going to go ahead and click a couple times to darken up the bottom of my stem here. Alright, so now I want to add a little green element, so I'm going to create a new layer here. I'm going to name this green dent. And setting up my gradient palette, I'm going to click my gradient tool, change my editor, so I have a green set up here, and my foreground is green too. And then with my radial gradient here, I'm going to click and pull, so I get kind of a green hue. And you can do more or less, depending on how much you want to apply. And then, if you want it to even come out a little bit, there you go. Then what we can do is you can use your opacity and your blending modes, depending on what it is that you want to apply to get the green to come through. A little green in there. And then you can drag it below the stem. And then on top of that, just to make sure it doesn't come in the outside form, activate the dent by hitting Command on the dent layer. And then with the same principle of using the rectangle marquee, just add to the form to make sure that you are getting all the back areas of the green dot and masking. So that way it doesn't affect the front area, but only affects the back. And then you can choose to show more or less of the dent. You can even have it be a normal color green and just reduce the opacity. You can have it soften up, interact. We don't want it to be that much. So I think where I like the difference aspect, and you can kind of just play with it more or less to get the visual effect you're looking for. Another aspect that you want to maybe consider is having a shadow for the stalk or stem. So on the stem layer here, I'm going to create a new layer and I'm going to name it Stem Shadow. And I'm going to drag this below the stem. And then with my rectangle marquee, I'm going to go to where my stem ends and just drag a little rectangle up here. And I'm going to fill with black by hitting Shift Backspace and choose black. And then deselecting. Now, this is pretty quick way to do it. Go to Edit, Transform, and choose Perspective. And you can pull out these areas here to kind of widen up the form. Just a little bit. You don't need anything too drastic. And then you can even bring in the bottom form a little bit. And another great thing you can do is you could choose to edit and you could choose to warp this, and you could pull the shadow to kind of bend with the form to give it a more natural twist. Once you're kind of happy with your shadow and your form, go ahead and click Apply. And then we can apply a blur to this by going to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and blurring the shadow up. Now you only need about anywhere from like 4 to 8, nothing too drastic. As you remembered with some of the other ones, you don't want to like overly push this, but you definitely want it to be a soft variation. Once that's set up, choose OK. And then we can fade that away by hitting our mask tool, and with our gradient feature, choosing our foreground and background color, black and white. Black hides, white shows. Make sure this is linear, 100%, and on the form here, click from the back and click to the front, and then the more or less you want to hide or show of the form. Kind of see how the shadow is going down. And then you want to make sure nothing happens on the outside of this, so I'm going to go ahead and go down to the very bottom. I'm going to activate my marquee by holding down Command or Control, selecting Inverse. I'm going to go to my actual stem shadow layer, and then with my brush, since black hides, now I can use a little bit larger brush by using my brackets and just kind of hide 100% of the back here so that we don't see any of the shadow coming through around the edge. And it's only all on the apple. Now this is a kind of a harsh shadow. If you want something a little bit smaller, that's okay too. You can reduce the opacity or you can change the size. All of these things play a role as far as creating that realism that you want for the form. Alright, so now that we have the basic apple created, you can make all the adjustments that you want. If you want to tweak anything, if anything's too dark, if your dots are too bright and you want to reduce down the opacity or change a blending mode, or if you want to reduce some of the shadowing or the backlight's not right, or you want to increase your dot size of your orange or your yellow to make it more vibrant. All of these things can be done and tweaked and adjusted to the way you like. Once you're happy, okay, you're completely happy with this, we're going to make sure all the outer edge behind the stem is cleaned up. So we're going to add a little background color. So we're going to create a new layer. We're going to name this background. And I'm going to drag it to the very bottom here. and turns out I already had one, but that's okay. On the very, very background layer, we're going to fill by hitting Shift Backspace, and we're going to choose a color, and I'm just going to stick with some kind of red color that I already have here. I'm going to do like a dark red. Choose OK. And see, now this will show me any flaws I have. For example, my back highlight is coming out of my form. I don't want that. So what I can do now is I'm going to hold down Command and activate my Apple marquee. Then I'm going to go to Select Inverse, and I'm going to go to the layers that I want to correct. The only layer this will not work for is the stem itself. Do not do this on the stem. It will not work. But it will work for anything else. So I can go to my backlight layer. And on my backlight layer here, I can just choose delete. So it cuts my form there. Since I currently don't see any other major flaws and everything looks pretty clear, I'm okay. But this is where you would do those things. All right, so let's say we're happy with this, we're content, we have our apple that we like. The next thing we need to do is I want you to select from your apple layer, then go all the way to the top to your stem highlight layer, hold down Shift and click. So now all those layers are activated. Okay? The only thing that's not activated are your two background layers. You do not want those selected for this. And what we're going to do is if you go to the upper right hand corner and click on this, you can see, or click on one of the layers, right click on one of the layers, you can see you have merge layers, you have merge visible layers, you have flatten image. You can also do things called new group from layers, and that's what we want to do. We want to put all of these layers into a pretty little group. So we're going to group these, and then we're going to name this group Apple. Now we have one big folder with our apple in it. The next thing we're going to do is duplicate this. We're going to right click, choose duplicate this group, and I'm going to leave it at Apple Copy, and then I'm going to turn off my apple. On my Apple Copy layer, I'm going to right click and choose Merge Group. Now you just created a flattened version of the entire apple as a group. Now it's time to manipulate the form to look like the apple. So we're going to go to Edit, Transform, and we're going to choose Warp. And with these warping capabilities, you are essentially going to make this look like an apple. Now, everyone has their own kind of ideas, interpretations. You know, tweak it, make it your own, have a little fun with it. There's a little imperfection you want to do. If you want one side to be larger than the other, so it's slightly oblong, like make it, have your own, have a little fun with it, tweak it. Right? They don't sit. You can see all the different ways in which you can warp this thing to create the form that you want. If you want to pull it down a little bit so it sits forward, if you want to push it up, you can create that look that you want. Okay? I'm going to choose Apply. Now, one other thing I want to do is I want to create a little bit of another highlight on my form. So I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to go ahead and with my pen tool, I want to choose Shape, and with my white, I just want to make a little highlight here on my little apple here. Just a little curve, similar to what I did on the coffee cup. I just want to like a little form here that I'm kind of creating. And I'm going to go ahead and filter blur this. I'm going to choose soft light here, and actually, let's do hard light. I'm just going to dim this down a little bit. And I'm going to do one more. And I'm just going to duplicate this layer and then scale it down by hitting Command T. Great. Alright, now they're a little too harsh for me, so I think I'm going to apply a little mask on my highlights just to kind of soften them up just a little bit. So remembering that black hides and white shows, I'm going to start at the bottom here and just drag up. Just kind of softening up a bit. And then same with, I'm going to apply the same thing to the top one and just kind of create a little bit softness. So it just creates like a little highlight on my apple. It could have been anything, could have been a reflection from a room, light, window, and I can make it like I did with my other ones. A few things I don't like, my backlight's a little abrupt, so I might have considered going in and changing that up a little bit on my original apple that I had. Alright, so now it's time to create on our other background layer a little bit of a ground. So I'm going to just go ahead and grab my ellipse marquee, and then holding down my Alt key, I'm just going to pull out. And I'm going to select a brighter red here. And then I'm going to fill by hitting Shift Backspace and choose foreground. Deselect. I'm going to go ahead and feather this out by blurring it. Gaussian blur. I just want like a soft background, right? Can I create like almost like an infinity wall? Nothing too crazy. Yeah, that looks nice. That looks good. And on top of this, I want to create a little bit of a ground shadow because, you know, it needs to be grounded a little bit. So I'm going to create one more, and I'm just going to put shadow. And I'm going to create a little black ellipse down here at the bottom, holding down Alt when I draw. And I'm going to fill with black. And I'm going to filter blur this. And yeah, 36, something like that. That looks good. Just kind of making it look like it goes with the form a bit here. All right. Now, one final little touch that I like to do is a little water drop. And this is just kind of a fun thing. You don't have to know this for this class, but it's just kind of a fun thing that I thought you guys might like to know. So go ahead and name a new layer and name it drop. That spelled good, it would be nice. All right, drop. Okay, using the circle marquee, we're just going to go ahead and I'm going to grab a little highlight right here. And I'm going to fill with a black and white. So I'm going to just click my default. And I'm going to grab my gradient tool. And I just want a linear gradient. And I'm going to zoom in just to help this make it a little bit more clearer. Okay, and then I'm going to, on a diagonal, with my black and white, I'm just going to drag. Okay. Now once I have this set, I'm going to change my blending mode to overlay. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to create a layer style. I'm going to do an inner shadow. And on the inner shadow layer style, we're going to choose a blending mode of linear burn. And we're going to have our opacity set at 40, our angle set at 30, and make sure you uncheck your use global light. We want a distance of 2. Our choke is 0, and our size is 5. And again, our angle should be 30. Right, so next we want to add a drop shadow layer. And the drop shadow is set for a linear burn with black. We have opacity set at 44%. but anywhere between 30 and 40% depending on your particular situation. We have our angle at 127 degrees. Please make sure your global light is off. I have my distance set at 5, my spread set at 0, and my size set at 5. Now my distance on my laptop came out as 10, but here's 5. So I would say look what's best for you. You might need to adjust your distance to get this visual effect. Anywhere between 5 and 10. Spread, make sure it's at 0, but your size again might be flexible. You can go anywhere from 5 to 14. Pick what's best for you to get this look. Then make sure you have your contours set at this angle with your noise at 0. Once you have everything in this viewing, go ahead and choose OK. The last little effect that we want to apply is a little highlight. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to grab my paintbrush, and using my bracket tool, I'm going to go down to a really small size here. And then with white, I'm going to, with 0% hardness, I'm going to create a little spot right here in my upper left-hand corner. And now we have a little raindrop. Now, this is a perfect circle. It doesn't have to be. We can use our warp tool to create this effect. So let's just take a look at this one, and let me show you if I duplicated this layer. I'm just going to go ahead and combine these. So I'm going to go like this. I'm going to right click and choose Group from Layers, and then I'm going to call this my drop layer. Drop 1. Okay, now I have a drop. Now I'm going to duplicate my drop. And this time I'm going to move it over with my move tool. So I have another drop, and I'm going to warp this one. Okay, so I'm going to go to open this up, go to my drop layer, and this I'm going to go to Control T. I'm going to choose warp, and then zooming in here, I'm going to warp my drop so it looks like a little raindrop. So I'm going to pull this down. And I'm just going to apply. So now I have a little bit of a drop, and I can even scale it down if I want it to be super tiny. And if I want to scale them all, I hold the top one here in Control T, and then I'll scale them both. And then hold down Shift and just make my little drop tiny and apply. So you can see how quickly you have a little teeny drop of dew, and you can choose to lighten your shadows and highlights if you want, change your focus, so you can make it your own, and you know, have fun with it, kind of create your own little drops and your own little characteristics to get the apple effect you want. This is just reducing my opacity a little bit here with like 60%, and you can kind of see how beautiful it kind of comes together. Check your own out, have a little fun, and there you go. You've just created an apple. When you're done, save me a JPEG and post it on Beachboard. And that's it. I'll see you guys in class. Thanks.